Thank you for staying with us. You're still watching The Breakfast on Plus TV Africa. It's time to take our first hot topic, and this says federal government rakes in 84 billion naira from electronic transfer levy in 3 months. So the federal government generated 84.05 billion naira from the electronic money transfer levy (Emtl) in the first quarter of 2025, reflecting a 76% increase from 47.47 billion recorded in the same period last year. The surge is attributed to stronger enforcement measures and the growing adoption of digital payment platforms nationwide. Breakdown of the figures shows that collections rose sharply in February 2025 to 36.64 billion naira, up from 15.79 billion naira in February 2024. In total, about 80.69 billion from the Emtl was shared among 3 tiers of government, with 15% going to the federal government and 85% to states and local councils, significantly higher than the 46.45 billion shared in Q1 of 2024. Year on year, the federal government's Emtl revenue rose by 76%, state earning increased by 62.6%, while local government councils recorded the highest growth at 88%. The Emtl introduced under the 2020 Finance Act imposes a 50 naira charge on electronic transactions of 10,000 naira and above, and has become a key source of non-oil revenue for Nigeria. Joining us to discuss this morning is Segun. He's a finance expert. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. So 84 billion naira just in 3 months. That is a very huge number. Knowing that, you know, the little 50 naira that we're paying, because I complain a lot of times, I'm always saying that, why do I keep getting charged? Like every Sunday you're being charged one fee or the other. But knowing that this little amount can get as much to up to 84 billion naira, and this is not crude that we're always used to, or maybe agriculture or something else. This is just a little tax levy that you're paying. What's your reaction to this, knowing that we have this amount of money that could be generated in just 1 quarter?
Well, so generally speaking, I'm an advocate for tax as a source of revenue for government. Think that you really can't fund development if you don't pay for it. You know, citizens, like you and citizens, you know, if people don't pay their fair share of the cost of development. So I traditionally, you know, stand on the side of anything that will increase government revenues from taxation. But having said that, I think it's important that one must also put a bit of a contextual slant to one's perspective on the matter. In as much as taxation is necessary, and in fact even would required for development, I think that there has to be a balancing act.
Yeah.
And this is actually the way taxation works all over the world. You have to balance the need to generate revenues to drive development and growth with the impact of, you know, taxation on the welfare and livelihood purchasing power of the average citizen. You know, so in a country like Nigeria, where, you know, people are really impoverished, the more taxes that you introduce, the worse it gets for them, and you know, you have an impact on purchasing power as well that could negatively impact GDP growth. So it's always a balancing act, and I think that this particular one, in addition to all of the other different charges that banks generally tend to impose on their customers, I think there's a need for some sort of intervention and a review and a new look into how we generally manage the entire electronic transaction cost to the average Nigerian banking public.
Okay, so, but I mean, it's great that we're saying this, and you've already put it into context that we need tax of some sort, but it needs to be balanced. Now, saying that this is a source of you know, generating revenue for the country, and it's not the natural way that we would go when it comes to oil, because that's where everybody's looking at. Do you think that it's sustainable, and you know, how does it even affect the people? Because I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm one of the poorest people, but 50 naira every other day is a loss for me as a person. But if you now look at the people in the rural communities that do not even have as much, where does that balance come in?
I was actually thinking about this thing that you said, right? You're absolutely correct. In fact, ironically, this exact matter, this 50 naira electronic,
and it's even more than 50 naira.
Conversation with a close family member.
Yeah, it's even more than Mr. Segun.
And the person was complaining that.
Yeah, I was even saying that it's even more than 50 naira, because there's still the amount that you pay for text, the text messages.
Money that, Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at that one single one in itself, just that 50 naira in itself is a problem.
Yeah.
And the point I make is, if you look at, most of us go to the market now, and we pay with bank transfers.
True.
You buy pepper, you buy pretty much anything that you can buy in the open market. You pay with bank transfers today. Cash transactions are really, really beginning to wither away. A lot of people are still using cash. But people pay with transfers. So I was just thinking to myself, so that poor lady in the market that is selling pepper or lemon or whatever, groundnut, you send a 3,000 naira to her, whatever you bought from her, 4,000, 5,000, the meat seller, the fish woman, cold fish seller, you buy a kilogram of chicken or a kilogram of fish or whatever from her. It just struck me that at the end of the day, the profits of these guys are usually, in hundreds, maybe 100 naira or 200 naira. The transaction time that you transfer to them, or transactions that are more than 10,000 naira, and that happens a lot now. You take 50 naira from them. It's a huge chunk of their profits, so and that's, like you said, it's not just the 50 naira that they have to deal with. There are so many other levies, either from government or from the banks, USSD code charges, SMS charges. The list goes on and on. Transfer charges in themselves, right? So if you put all of this together, it's quite a lot of value that we're taking from the pockets of, especially of the less privileged people at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So it's rather unfortunate. Like I said, we've got to find a balance, and I would have thought that this would be perhaps one of the things that the Taiwan committee would have looked at in its reviewing the entire tax framework of the country, to find a way to reduce this burden on a very, very large proportion of our population that live below the poverty line. How do we insulate them from this without driving them away, from electronic banking and electronic banking adoption and financial inclusion? Because what you want is the more people that are using electronic transfers, and all of that in any economy all over the world, there's a direct correlation between that and per capita GDP. The wealth generation capacity of an economy has a direct proportional relationship with adoption of electronic money transfers. This is statistically established, right? So the more people we're able to bring into the financial circles and then get to adopt financial payments, the better, the more efficient our economy is, the more we're able to generate value and productivity, and the richer people become. So we really need to find a way to ensure that, in as much as we want to generate revenues from government, we don't crowd people out and drive people away from cashless banking that we say is actually a thrust of our economic policy as a country. So for me, I think it's a conundrum that the government really needs to look at and put their thinking caps on.
Okay, for me, right, I mean, I schooled in the UK, and for the entire time that I was there, I don't think I had to pay a bank transfer. I don't think any money was being taken out of my account. The money I put in is what I get back. And even for card, I think here they also do card maintenance. You have to pay for your card. So there's so many levies that you have to pay for with the banking system in Nigeria. And there are times I've always said, you know what, maybe I need to go back and start digging a hole in my backyard or something and put my money in there. But if we're looking at this, right, there should be a reason why the federal government is trying to generate this fund. What is this fund supposed to be used for? Because how do we see it reflect, you know, in the daily lives of the citizens? And this time I'm talking about, you know, grassroots development, I'm talking about infrastructural development, I'm talking about the healthcare system. So if the government is looking at generating all of this revenue, right, and I know that they've said, you know, a quota is being given to the states and the local government and whatnot, how are they supposed to be using this money and the level of transparency that we want to see? Because if you're taxing me and taking 15 naira out of my account for every transaction that I do, then I should know what you're using that money for. Don't you think so?
No, I mean, absolutely. You know, so like I said earlier, I'm an advocate for, you know, citizens paying their fair share of the cost of development. In fact, it's not a question of fair share. The truth of the matter is that it is citizens that pay for development all over the world. However, having said that, in other parts of the world, you find that the accountability systems and structures guarantee that the monies collected from citizens are used to develop their lives, to improve their lives and make their quality of life just simply better across all spheres of public service, you know, whether it's education, healthcare, you know, utilities, and what have you. Those monies collected are used in doing things that every citizen can feel the impact of. And you find that in those societies that you mentioned, for example, where you schooled, look, the slightest decline in the quality of public service results in protests. You know, if power supply suffers slight interruptions or disruptions for just a short period of time, people hit the streets and complain. With public transportation, you know, suffers disruptions and becomes inefficient, people complain. You know, so in Nigeria, we've got to understand that without those accountability structures, these monies will simply disappear. And we'll be losing on both sides. The citizens that are paying the monies lose value, lose money that they're supposed to use to drive consumption, which will lead to development and growth. But on the other side, because there's no accountability, those monies disappear anyway and don't generate the development they're supposed to drive. You know, so it's a real problem, and it's only Nigeria that will say when they want to solve that problem. No government anywhere in the world by itself, of its own volition, decides to become accountable to the people. Nobody wants to do that. You've got to force them. You've got to make them give account for the money that you give to them, so we know what they're using it for. So the question is, all of this electronic money transfer levies that have been raised, 84 billion in 3 months. So if you just extrapolate that, that's almost $500 billion naira in a year, right?
And from just one source alone.
What are they doing with it?
Yeah, and from just one source alone.
Exactly, from just that one source. What are they doing with it? An interesting number, women. Our total electronic transactions as a country almost doubled between 2023 and 2024. We did 606 trillion naira in electronic money transfers in 2023. It was 1.07 quadrillion naira. We crossed the quadrillion level for the first time, you know, in 2024. You know, so transactions are being generated, you know, and this levy, this tax from these transactions is going to increase significantly, because electronic transaction adoption is increasing significantly because of the structure of the economy. You know, so what's going to happen to all of that money? Where are we going to go?
I mean, that's a question that they need to definitely answer. And I mean, this is just for this, you know, this levy right now, this 15 naira for the transaction. There's still the stamp duty. There's still the account maintenance. There's still so many others that they're charging people for. So with this now, if they're recording this success, let me put it that way, in getting about 84 billion in a quarter, do you think at some point they might consolidate everything whereby Nigerians don't have to pay as much? Is that going to be possible? And maybe just all of the account maintenance, card maintenance, whatever, just, you know, put them together as one charge. Is that something we might see?
Absolutely. It's the only way to go, and it's just from an enlightened self-interest point of view, it's the smartest thing to do. First of all, So let me just quickly clarify that the stamp duty that we used to pay is the same thing that has now been renamed in code electronic money transfer. So you don't pay 50 naira for stamp duties and then pay 50 naira for electronic money transfer.
Okay.
The Finance Act of 2020 actually renamed, that stamp duty, the electronic money transfer, and then got implemented, I think, in 2020. So that renaming happened 2020, and then got implemented in 2021, and then got expanded, in terms of scope up until 2024, December 1 last year, where mobile money operators were also included in the need to pay that money. So just to provide that clarity, so it's the same tax, stamp duty and Emtl. However, now having said that, to the point you make, look, it's even for the banks, we've got to understand that the primary purpose of banking all over the world is intermediation, is to take money from people that have surplus, the surplus units, as they say in economics and banking and finance, and to give it to the deficit units, the people that need the money, people that want to take loans. That's the primary purpose of banking. It's the core role of banks in any society. You are supposed to make your income from providing that intermediation service. All of these fees, levies, commissions, charges that banks have now become addicted to is actually counterproductive in terms of financial inclusion. You are making people have second thoughts and finding other ways to keep their money outside of the banking system because it's simply too much. So one of the banks, while I was reading up, in preparation for this conversation with you this morning, one of the banks in April introduced zero fee services if you use their mobile banking app. And a lot of the fintech apps are doing that. You don't pay a dime for transferring money from one account in one bank to, on your platform, or your fintech platform, to another bank elsewhere. They're beginning to do that. Why? Because they understand that I don't need to make my money from charging this little bit. It amounts to something, one bank in particular made 84 billion naira just from electronic transfers alone in 2024. So it does amount to something. However, if you look at the negative impact it has on inclusion and on attracting people to bring their monies to the bank, I think the banks need to rethink this whole levies and transaction thing and focus more on their core mandate of intermediation and providing loans to drive development and growth. If you do that more, you get more monies into your system. You have more what they call floats in banking. You have more free money that you can then, earn a float revenue on. So we've got to be smarter. Even the government have to realize that taxing people too heavily will only drive them to look for ways to avoid or even evade those taxes. So how can you streamline these things to ensure that it's not too burdensome on people so that they can, generate more productivity, more value, and you as a government have a larger tool to tax. So we've got to look at efficiency more than efficiency in tax administration and all of that, more than increasing taxes in themselves.
Yeah, and people don't want to feel like they're being overtaxed, like double taxation. So I'm paying for this, I'm paying for that, and it's endless. Where do we balance it all out? But looking at this now, because this is a non-oil generation, non-oil revenue generation, how do you think that the government can sustain this momentum? It's great to hear that they've been able to make over 84 billion naira in just 3 months. So how can they sustain this momentum without having to hurt the economic growth as a whole, especially when the people do not want to pay as much when it comes to taxes?
I think what government needs to do more of is to find ways to bring more transactions and more people into the tax net without necessarily increasing the actual taxes or tax rates that people are paying. It's the only way to increase your tax revenues and your non-oil revenues without overburdening the people. Bring more people in. Right now, the percentage of people that are paying taxes to those that are not is simply too heavily skewed. So you find that we're punishing fewer people, and fewer people are paying on behalf of the rest of Nigerian society. Government has to find more efficient ways, more effective ways. FIRS, now proposed to be renamed to the Nigeria Revenue Service. They've got to be smarter, they've got to use technology better, they've got to look at different transaction types that they can leverage on and also get a cut of the value that is being generated without reducing purchasing power, without reducing inflation, without reducing transaction flows and transaction velocity within the economy. It's an intricate balancing act. It always is when it comes to tax matters. Otherwise, you will affect the development and growth. So I think that we've got to think more. We've got to think outside of the box as a government and do things a bit differently to increase revenues without killing off the form and state.
Yeah, I think that increasing purchasing power is super important, because right now, if you look at the economy, a lot of people cannot even afford the basic necessities of life, and it might just seem burdensome if you keep having to tax them over and over again. So if you can increase that, purchasing power, fantastic. I mean, people would just be happy because they know that they can afford whatever they need. Anyways, this is how much we can take on the show right now. We want to say thank you so much for coming. It's always a pleasure having you, Segun. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, man. Have a wonderful day.
You too, sir. All right, we're speaking with Segun Sopitan. He is an economic expert, and we've just been looking at the fact that, well, the federal government has generated over 84 billion naira when it comes to the Emtl levies. We'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing our second hot topic, so please stay with us.